Hi, I'm Bob Jenkins. I wanted to introduce myself to you and Local Hooker Rods. What I want to do over the next several minutes is go through and explain how we build a rod, what Local Hooker Rod stands for, what actually goes into the construction of a well-built rod here in the U.S., and what sets us apart from rods that brought in from overseas. So over the next couple minutes, we're going to take you through a guided tour of our shop and show you exactly what goes into building a Local Hooker rod. And why, when you spend the money for a Local Hooker rod, you know you're getting a rod that's handmade here in the United States by fishermen, for fishermen, and all the quality and the details and the things that go into it. You'll hear me say during this next few minutes, it's what's under the hood that really counts. And when you see this, I think you'll come out at the other end, and you'll come out watching this, saying to yourself that it is in fact what really is what's under the hood that makes a rod so good. They all look clean and special, they all look clean and shiny when they're on a rack. But when you lift the hood and look what's underneath, that's what really differentiates us from other rods. So please take a few minutes, watch this video, and I guarantee that when you watch this and at the end of it, you too will look at this and say, you'll appreciate what goes into a well-built rod. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, what we're doing here is we're going to find the spine to the rod so we know what we're building on.
And let's explain the importance of spining a rod, Mike.
All right, spining a rod, one, is important in several ways. One, if you're using it on a freshwater rod, spining helps casting accuracy. As you know, being in the repair business, a lot of people come ask me a question about why the rod casts to the left or to the right. So one of the reasons is if the rod isn't spined right, when you load it and the spine is off to the left a little bit, it'll shoot to the left. And the other reason for it is when you're fighting a fish or you load, fighting a fish, you want the spine, as we're doing here. When we bend down, you'll see the rod has this actual spine. It keeps snapping back to one position.
And what we mean by that spine is that there's a natural curve, a parabolic curve of every rod. It's the way, like we as people, we bend over forward pretty easily. The rod is meant to bend one way and bend well that way. So right now, the way Mike's got that rod bent is where the actual natural spine of the rod is.
Right, and one of the purposes of it, now when you're fighting a fish, the rod, because it's spined, if this was a casting rod, conventional, your guides would go on this top edge and your reel would be facing up. If it's a spinning rod, you'd put your guides underneath. The rod is stable at that point, so that when you're fighting a fish, the rod isn't trying to twist itself. It's keeping itself upright. So when you find the spine, you take a marker, we just make a line right along the top. Now when we put the reel seat on, we line the reel seat up to the mark. If we're doing a spinning rod, then we turn the reel seat over and we'll mark the underneath. And then we'll set the reel seat to that mark. And if it's all done correctly, when the rod is flexed, everything should bend and should twist the reel seat and everything into the proper position, so that you're not fighting the rod and the fish. You're just fighting the fish.
An example of what Mike's talking about is this rod I've got right here. You'll notice as soon as I start to put load on this rod, see what the tip does? It's already wanting to pull over to the side there. Now it's pulling over to the other side. You'll also see that those guides are turning completely off to the side, where the natural curve of this rod is over there. So this rod, as soon as you start putting load on that, the rod wants to pull to the side. You can see those guides are all twisted to the side. This rod was spined wrong. This rod was spined completely wrong. So what Mike was also saying is now when you go to cast this rod, the energy of the rod wants to turn to the spine. So even if you're casting off to the left, you may see your lure go off to the right somewhere. The same applies to when you're retrieving a fish and you're pulling that fish in. Not only are you fighting the fish, you're fighting the rod. You know, look how that rod is twisted. So now the rod wants to twist in my hands. It's all over the place. And this thing is literally all over the place just by putting load on it. So this using there keeps those threads tightly compacted. Gives a nice even consistency to the underwrap and a very clean look.
Wrap up the guide foot, then we wrap back down the guide foot. That serves several purposes. One, it's a very strong wrap, a double wrap, and if whatever happens, the rod gets banged on a sharp edge and it cuts through the epoxy, the first layer of thread protects the second layer of thread. Tie it off. And it makes for an extremely strong wrap, extremely reliable.
And this is how you tie it off. This is one of the ways to watch for a well-made rod. You can see how the thread has been tied off and hand pulled, tightened there. Whereas many rods that are made factory assembled high-end capacity are not tied this way.